The Royal Mail chose to honor the centenary of Queen Elizabeth with a special stamp collection. On the surface, a simple tribute. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettling the realization became. Because once, something like this meant everything, not out of mere respect, but out of cultural weight. A stamp wasn't just postage, it was identity, legacy, permanence. Now? Who even notices? Who still collects them? A younger generation has drifted so far from these traditions that such symbols barely register anymore. And yet, the image of the Queen remains unmistakable. Instantly recognized. Unshaken by time. That's the paradox. Travel across the country, and you'll see it everywhere: statues, monuments, echoes of Queen Victoria, reminders of a reign that refuses to fade. And then you start to notice a pattern, something almost unsettling in its consistency. It is the women of the monarchy whose presence lingers the longest, whose power feels enduring. 2 reigns. 2 figures. Both commanding time itself. And yet, when you look for others, kings, figures who should stand just as tall, you find yourself searching harder. Their memory feels quieter, tucked away, confined to places like Windsor, preserved but not alive in the same way. Which raises the question no one seems to answer. Why do some royal figures become immortal in the public mind, while others quietly recede into history? That question took on a sharper edge after a conversation with someone who had recently stepped away from employment inside Montecito. Because behind the polished image, behind the headlines, there's something far less stable: constant staff turnover, a revolving door the public barely sees. And that's where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Because within the royal family, legacy is built on structure, on continuity, on an unspoken understanding of duty. But outside that framework? It's different. There's a sense, rightly or wrongly, that the blueprint was there, the example was clear, and yet, somehow, it keeps slipping through their hands. Again and again. It's not just about mistakes, it's about not recognizing them. About pushing forward as if perfection is unquestionable, even when cracks are visible to everyone else. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because history doesn't remember those who refuse to learn from it. It remembers those who understand it, who carry it, shape it, and leave behind something that cannot be ignored. It is interesting to note that while Harry was speaking with the workers, he reportedly revealed this shocking information, which many people were unaware of. In any case, this reveals a great deal about the degree to which he is connected. Permit me to expand. I find it to be an intriguing thing. I was thinking that the worst thing that Harry said in the interview was the fact that he is no longer stuck when he sat down. You know, I felt it was the worst thing that he said. To add insult to injury, I just recently shared with you that Harry is adamant about getting rid of that particular video. You know, the video of Freedom Flight in which he basically says that he is traveling halfway around the world to a person whom we have never seen before, and he looks like an absolute, complete, and utter maniac. This is what you think. How thick are you? If you had the safety and protection of something like the British monarchy, where everything up until this point was provided for you, then why would you do anything like that? In addition, if you recall well, you have the mother-in-law showing up in that video, right? Not to mention the fact that Meghan is currently holding Archie, Harry's kid. I have no doubt that everything is going to turn out wonderfully. And this is the reason why I can comprehend why he desires to get rid of that footage. Being able to think that things did not turn out the way it appeared to be must be a terrible recollection for him at this point. And when you compare how he seemed in those few short years to how he appears now, you see a man who appears to be battered, worn, and literally wrung out by the years. Having said that, it was interesting to chat to the staff members because they mentioned that Harry himself is a little, shall we say, bored, to say the least, and that he is always eager to talk to the staff. This is something that Meghan despises, as stated by that staff worker, because he is simply too talkative. In addition, you should realize that when he is talking, they can naturally ask him questions such as, "Do you miss England? What are some of your favorite dishes that you wish you could eat again?" The amount of information is excessive, if you ask me. According to appearances, Meghan is a cold and calculated person who just tells you what is required and then returns to inspect it. There are occasions when she can be pretty warm and welcoming, but you don't go past the surface of a typical conversation, do you agree? There is something similar to that. As opposed to Harry, who might talk about Brussels sprouts and, for example, what he did during the winter or his favourite spot to drink in London, Harry might talk about other things. Too much information is available. Meghan simply cannot stand it. On the other hand, what became public knowledge about this was that they were having a pretty open conversation with Harry on a Friday afternoon, right? And the problem is, he was expressing how much he longed for England in his expressions. This was the actual kind of story, and the concept that emerged was that, yeah, he wants a new kind of life. This was the realization that came out. It was not precisely his intention to give up the royal lifestyle entirely. Nevertheless, you should realize that even after he had left the military, he desired to pursue a different path. And that was the thing about the Invictus, and how they assisted him in developing that, which was Catherine, which was, of course, William, and then the King, who was the Prince of Wales at the time. To get Harry something interesting that he could perform and make a good show of it himself, even the Queen was participating in the activities that were taking place behind the scenes. One thing that makes this even more intriguing is the fact that Harry disclosed that their objective was to never give up at this point. You are saying that we are talking about something that happened 5 years ago, right? That was supposed to be done in the fullness of time, after the bereaved Queen had passed away, as that was the original plan. In addition, if you give it some thought, you'll realize that this would have been a little bit more reasonable. In reality, the concept was that the Queen, who was in her 90s at the time, should have known better than to continue on for an infinite amount of time. Following that, Harry could, in essence, take advantage of this opportunity to start over with his life and the life of his wife. And it would appear that this was agreed upon. I must reiterate that, apparently, I must state. On the other hand, things started to happen all of a sudden. This was the sentence that he used in his statement. Things progressed to the point where it was virtually impossible for them to remain. Someone else in my team asked, "You mean for you?" Contrary to popular belief, it was his wife who was the one who struggled with a wide variety of issues, etc. We are familiar with the tales because, as a matter of course, they have told such tales in a complicated manner and in a manner similar to that of Oprah Winfrey. Now, in a very short amount of time, Harry became aware that he had talked a little bit after his turn. And he responded by saying, "Oh, you know, I mean, that is now in the past." And he dismissed it all as if it were nothing at all, as you may say. In reality, however, the concept was that, as I mentioned earlier, he was not going to leave throughout the lifespan of the Queen. Meghan, however, was unable to take it any longer. In her opinion, she did not belong there. No one was being polite to one another. There was no one who inquired about her. The question was posed by my colleague, who is a really astute individual, "But how did you feel about that? Did you feel miserable?" And the line was just heartbreaking. Evidently, he stated, "Well, I suppose that is the case. And if that is the case, you either know or you don't know." But, of course, Harry's one direction, and this is the thing that came back, was that his job was essentially to protect his wife and his child. This was the thing that came back. And this is the point where, with regard to the ultimate thing, it was evident that he had been brought up exceptionally well because he believed it. One of the things that I found most interesting about this narrative was the fact that it was obvious that Harry had alternatives in mind. From the moment she arrived, Meghan had other plans, one of which was to speak with individuals about possible opportunities to conduct interviews and podcasts. All of a sudden, she couldn't wait to leave that place as soon as possible. On the royal train, she had had enough of being seated next to the Queen, waving to people she did not know, and seeing others dance around. She had experienced all of these things. For her, that was of no consequence. On the other hand, I believe that what is interesting is this. Do you find yourself wondering whether Meghan Markle is beginning to realize that perhaps her life wasn't as terrible as she thought it was? Could it be that she made a hasty decision all on her own? As far as Harry is concerned, there are aspects of the wonderful British way of life that both of them possess. On the other hand, it's possible that one of them will miss it more than the other.